So I'm excited for this one. I'm joined by my wife, Deanna, ISTJ or ESTJ, depending on, I don't know, what mood I'm in and
We've had the debate.
What's happened recently. So this one's going to be about therapy. We're going to talk about, type in therapy, how our types view therapy, either a tool or some other reason, but also just talk about some of the, I'm kind of a newbie. I'm a little baby on the therapy path. She's done it a lot longer than I have, but some of the discoveries that I've had being so focused on type and then having this whole other thing to think about. Now I have a bunch of questions that I don't know if I'm going to answer them all, but I'm sort of going to ask them. Maybe Deanna can help me figure them out. And I thought therapy was really weird when I first started because you think you've asked yourself all the questions that you could possibly ask yourself, but then your therapist starts just asking you things and you're just like, I've never even thought
It's never even crossed my mind. Yeah.
It's never crossed my mind. And also, ouch, that question that you just asked me, now I really have to dig into some things that I kind of was hiding from asking. Now I have to answer it and now I got to really think. So did you have that same experience?
I feel like with my first therapist, no. I don't think that my first therapist ever really challenged me in that way. I do think that he served the exact purpose I needed him to serve though in that moment. He wasn't enabling in any way, but he was just I needed support and he was the support at the time. Yeah.
What to do.
He really did give me good direction. But with my current therapist, yes, she has said some things that I wouldn't even say challenging, but are just, like you said, never crossed my mind. Right. It's a totally different way of looking at things. And I wonder if she realizes that one sentence that she says resonated so much with me, and that keeps coming back into my life and popping up I'm going to remember that one thing she said. If she even realizes how profound it is,
Yeah, I think I've had the same experience. And I think much like when people are first on their type journey, they have to define a thing because they think that they're the only person that's ever felt it. But then when you go to therapy and there's this kind of the TI definition of, hey, that thing that you're doing or that you're feeling or experiencing, that's actually called X. And a lot of other people have felt X. And what they've done about that thing is they've done this. And you're like, wow, so there's, you feel like, okay, this is not something that I'm feeling by myself. There's actually people that have dealt with it for hundreds of years. You just didn't know what it was called, but now you have a support system with a good therapist that says, you can do this, read this book. And I like to read, she likes to do podcasts, but look into this, read this author. And when you read that author, you're going to stumble upon this person. And you just keep going down, you're like, wow.
So do you feel like in the same way when people discover their type, they're like, cool, I have all these other people that kind of have the same way their brain works. They finally don't feel alone per se or weird.
Same exact connection.
Same now when you're in therapy and they give you labels of ways you were feeling or experiences you went through to be oh, well, if there's a label, then that means there's so many more people in the world that have experienced the same thing.
Yeah, have experienced the same thing. And I think from that you're like, well, why are so many people experiencing the same thing? And I think that kind of leads into the next thing. So we know with type, it's you have your brain, the way your brain functions, and some of that's nature nurture, but some of it's just inborn. And then my question during therapy was well, how much of the way your type manifests itself is just based on how you were raised in your childhood? And because I've been INTJs and ISTJs, all the types, and I'm but that doesn't look like anything that I thought they would be. But now that I've gone through therapy, I'm what if their childhood was just, they were an INTJ, but they went through the best childhood or the worst childhood, trauma, abuse, neglect, whatever they went through. So that added a whole nother layer that the type community, Enneagram community doesn't really talk about, but they don't have to talk about it. It's not necessary to understand it, but this is a big layer.
Well, I mean, like you've always said, one ISTJ is never going to look exactly the same as another ISTJ, right? And so what you're just saying is, even though you have all these shades, perhaps maybe the shades could come from that childhood experience.
Yeah. So then you're digging into all of that, and then it kind of makes you question, well, did I put on the INTJ facade because that was the only way that I could survive. Where I
was it your coping mechanism?
Is my type my coping mechanism?
Yeah.
I don't believe so, but I think a lot of people that tell me they're this type, I'm like, well, it's just not it.
You can go more extreme in one way or the other because, I mean, you and I both had siblings.
Yes.
So our siblings had the same experience we had, but they have totally different personalities than us.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that a childhood experience, like, gives you a specific personality.
Right.
Like, I kind of agree with you that you're sort of just born with that personality, but certain traits will be heightened or kind of buried away maybe based on that childhood experience.
Well, it's funny because I said something to you the other day. I was like, all these books about therapy makes you feel bad for people, and I don't like it.
You're developing empathy for people you used to just not like or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh man, is that what happens? You start to be like, I get why that person might be that way.
You at least like understand. It's not like you're giving people excuses.
No.
But you understand, and then it gives you a little bit of distance from like, if they acted a certain way in the past, you used to think that's so bizarre. Oh my gosh. And now you can be like, well, I know kind of perhaps why they're acting that way. And you can not take it like personally or things like that.
It takes some work, but you can not take it as personally. Mm-hmm. But also I realize that your type can't fix your childhood issues. Like just being like, going through the steps of understanding all your cognitive functions and how to utilize some of the functions that maybe are in your shadow or you're not used to using all the time. Your personality type by itself is not like a healing. There's no path to healing just from your personality type. You have to have some sort of outside source to help you along the way.
Well, it's a really good starting point.
It's a great starting point.
Let's just dig in and find out about myself, but also about others. Mm-hmm. And like what I've learned, because I'm an ISTJ, identify as an ISTJ, is that like a more underdeveloped ISTJ that I was in the past would be like super judgy and just think like, my way or the highway, in the sense of like, I've evaluated and this is the one and only best, highest way to do something. And everyone else just hasn't figured it out yet, right? Like that's kind of like where my underdeveloped mind would be. And now I've learned, like you and I especially, we can have the same exact goal and completely different approaches and accomplish the same goal. Yeah. And so I've learned that like, even though there's a way I would do it and a way you would do it, there's not actually like a ranking. Yeah.
And that's from there, like you've learned that through therapy?
Yeah, I think possibly because part of therapy has taught me not to, and I think yoga too, because I've done a lot of yoga, is to not to put like a value judgment on things. So a lot of times when I'm doing yoga, they'll say like, breathe in, breathe out, and like listen to your body, like what parts of your body hurt right now, but you don't have to have a judgment of, well, what does that mean? You don't always have to assign a meaning to things or a value to it. You know?
Well, value is a great way to kind of segue into the next section, next question I really want to talk about, which is pre-therapy. What was your ISTJ natural response to either an emotional or internal conflict? What would you try to do to handle it?
Okay, so pre-therapy, I wouldn't have been able to even identify that I was having an emotional anything because my coping mechanism was to just go do. So, I mean, that's why we've spoken in the past, like I had 5 jobs at one point. Like I was just... It was avoidant coping mechanism. And the thoughts and the feelings were buried so deep down that I didn't even realize I was having them. Right. Like, I would always say, like, jokingly, I'd rather be busy than bored. That's all I would say. Yeah. But I mean, there's so much more packed into that if you unpack that. Yeah. So, like, that's what I would do to cope with feelings is I wouldn't cope with them. I'd essentially run away from them by keeping my mind and my body so busy that I didn't have to look at it or address it. And
I think that is true. And then for me and a lot of other INTJs would just intellectualize their feelings, intellectualize it, rationalize it, and then push it away or segment it out of their their life, or I'll deal with it later. But really, and some of the therapy talks about like intellectualizing is fine, but that's not really dealing with it. That's just you. It's another coping way. It's mechanism is just to think about it a lot, but you did it. You took full action in the physical, bodily way, where I just mentally thought about it, but then we didn't share. I could have taken a little bit from you, like did something about it where you could have maybe thought about it more, but we're both avoiding those things.
Yeah.
That is a type thing as well.
But I will say that each of these functions can be an asset and a liability. Because here's the thing, pre-therapy, like when I first started therapy, I remember it was almost like a mourning process, because it's like, well, how much do I really want to change? Because I feel like where I've gotten, I'm very successful, So like, I don't want to become someone who's lazy now, I don't want you to change me completely or whatever. And I remember my therapist saying to me like, no. You're Deanna. You're never going to not be Deanna. What we're going to do is just like take a bite out of that misery apple.
Okay.
Quite
a phrase.
And that's just one of those things. Maybe he doesn't remember saying that, but it really stuck with me. I was like, okay, like my life experience is just going to be better. Not that I'm going to be a different person.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm feeling too. So I view therapy through my type as a tool for improvement. And in some ways I used to think that it was like, that's the ultimate like woo-woo, like, oh, you got to go to therapy. Like that's kind of like admitting weakness, but that's part of it is that part of any recovery process, whether you're going through AA or something, is that first step is saying, I'm powerless. Like there are certain things I actually can't control. You and I are both control types.
Oh,
so definitely. Part of it is like, hey, you know what? There's some things you can't even deal with because you don't even know that they're there. Like you were saying, you can't control the things that you're choosing to not see.
Yeah. So
when you start to learn about yourself, you actually do develop better. Like I'm always about personal development, so is Deanna, but like the INTJ type might turn their nose at therapy, not realizing that it's actually makes you more powerful, but it does cause some emotional pain as you're progressing up towards like, your better self, but it is kind of not comfortable.
Well, I do feel like it's very rare for someone just to like start therapy just because, even though everyone says, oh my gosh, it's so good for maintenance. Like you should go once a week or whatever, just to talk to someone. Like everyone goes, yeah. But they'll never actually start it unless they've had some sort of crisis.
Right.
And in this crisis, they've come to the surrender that you're referring to. Yeah. And they go, all right, well, the way I'm doing it isn't working, so I need help. And it's so great to have a therapist who has like that third party perspective, and they're independent, but they're very, very knowledgeable and they want to help. And so for me, the way I look at therapy, I think, people joke the ISTJs are like a machine or a robot.
Yeah.
So I think, I look at it definitely like a tool.
Yes.
Like it's a tool to, improvement is not even a big enough word for it. People will go, I'm reading self-help or self-improvement books.
Yeah.
Like, for me, I guess if I'm looking at my life goals, it's helping me get closer and closer to like how I want to feel internally, what experience I want to have in this life, how I want to treat others. Like it's so much bigger than that, but down to it, if someone said, well, what does therapy do for you? It is a tool. Like I feel like we're both intellectual folk.
Yes.
I mean, I do things a lot.
More than me.
But I'm not in college anymore. And I feel like I get to learn every time I go to therapy.
Yes.
And it's so interesting. I'm learning about myself. I'm learning about others in my life. And lifelong learning is important for everyone.
It's a digging experience. So you're digging, you learn about yourself, and then you start to question, what about my parents and how are they raised? And and then you have your own kids, and then you see how you're raising them, and you're like, you watch them raise your kid, and you're like, wow, now I'm learning about through therapy like how all these generationally gets passed down, and then you basically learn to break the cycle of whatever they did wrong you can try to fix. the other thing is you realize like you'll never not, like there will always be some mistake you will make. And one of the first things is like, you are fallible, you will make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. But me, I always negative self-talk. Deanna tells me all the time, like, you need to, like, I could do like one negative thing and I'll like, idiot. And she's like, why do you say that? I'm like, well, it just makes so that I don't do it again. But like, where does that come from? I've never analyzed it. Now you do analyze, like, where does that come from?
Because no one's ever done that to you.
No one's actually said that to me.
Yeah.
But my negative self-talk, I thought was like motivational. Like a lot of influencers that I kind of respect have a negative self-talk about themselves. They write books about that. And I'm like, yeah, that's me. Negative self-talk drives you forward.
I mean, I disagree, because the way that I've learned to look at it is you would never treat someone you love that way. You'd never treat your friend like if they dropped a bag of groceries, your instant thing would not be like, idiot.
Or my
like,
son.
If your son did that, if I did that, like, you would never ever say that. So why wouldn't you treat yourself with the same respect that you would treat someone else, someone you love? Like, so the question is, does that mean you don't love yourself as much as you love everyone around you? Like that. So that's what really stuck with me. Like, wow, I need to work on myself to treat myself at least at the same level as I'm treating other people, right?
Yeah. So it's like I said at the beginning, it's not like I have a bunch of answers on what therapy will do for you or what it's just open up a lot of questions about, okay, so we have personality type, this is what this channel is all about, but if you've been in therapy, how do you think it affects type? Do you think that you've learned that it just adds another layer to the onion, or has it really truly been an experience where you've learned that?
I mean, I look at it like it's an evolution. You can have a child ISTJ, and you can have an adult and then a wise old man ISTJ, right? And I don't necessarily mean just by age. I mean by development. So I look at therapy as no matter what your personality type is, it's going to help you on those rungs to evolve your personality type. You still understand yourself. You understand your like knee-jerk reactions, like, oh, haha, of course I would think that first, right? But then the therapy helps you go, I'm going to take a step back. What action am I really going to take, even though my knee-jerk is to do this? Do I still want to do that, or do I want to do something else?
Yeah. It does help you explain those instantaneous responses to things that feel natural and feel correct. Like for me, it'd be like, my son could drop a fork and it would make a loud clanging sound. And it's startling, but then my next immediate response is, do I yell? Because what is that? I could have like a little something in my head that makes me annoyed, but the like adrenaline going up and the need to get mad is something that, what is that about? There are people tell you that that's actually not like a normal thing to just instantly get mad, because no one's trying to make you upset. And
there's no ill intent.
There's no ill intent. So little things like that suddenly become massive places where you dig down and go, why do I have those reactions to this? Why does, when someone says a specific phrase, when someone's like, for me, when someone says, does that make sense?
You hate that.
I hate that, but I hate that because of something, and I'm still working through that. So, because it's obviously they're just being nice. Like, are you tracking? They're not insulting my intelligence, which is my first reaction. But that's how you take it,
yes.
And many people probably laugh at it, like, yeah, I think the same thing. So it's stuff like that you don't realize are part of a bigger picture of your life, where you just think that's a normal thing, but it's probably not. And therapy is a good way to help with that.
Yeah. So have you guys done therapy? Has it helped you? Do you try and get others on board? Because I feel like Joe's always like, oh my gosh, therapy is so great.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to do it. But again, everyone has to come to it at their own time. Yeah,
let me know what your experiences are with therapy. Maybe there's probably some people on my channel that are therapists, and maybe you could talk a little bit more about some of the things I've talked about, or love to hear from the audience just generally about your experiences with therapy. Thank you all for listening.
Bye, guys.